Welcome back to SportsLine, everybody. More Preds talk as we dissect their series with the Chicago Blackhawks. Of course, as we said, the Preds down 2-1 in this best-of-7 series. Game 4 tomorrow night back in Chicago. That's where we find my partner in crime, my buddy, the best sportscaster in all of Nashville, Steve Layman, who's in Chicago covering the series for us. Steve, good evening.
JB, I'm the coldest sportscaster in all of Nashville. It is cold and blustery and windy up in Chicago today.
Well, that's why they call it the Windy City. Plus, you got to suffer through eating that thick pizza. A New Yorker like myself likes the thin crust. You being a Midwesterner, I know you like that deep dish, but come on, man, you got to go thin crust, baby.
Oh, no way. If we're doing pizza wars, it is Chicago over New York all day long. I mean, think about it. You put a Chicago pizza on top of a New York pizza, and the New York pizza just disappears. You don't even realize it exists anymore. So that's basically what the figurative battle would be, too.
All right. Fair enough. We'll have to debate that at another time. All right. I look at where this series is, and I look at where this Preds team is. No Shea Weber, a still ailing Mike Fisher, and a struggling Pekka Rinne. I don't know, Steve. I think this team's in trouble in this series. What say you?
It certainly appears that way, JP. This is a team that played well throughout the regular season until the final couple weeks, maybe month of the year when they had some struggles there. But it still felt like when they got into this playoff series, they were going to be able to right the ship, that the emotions and the intensity of the playoffs would get them going back in the right direction. But in order to do that, they needed a couple things to happen. They needed to be healthy. If anything, they've gotten less healthy in this series. When you talk about Mike Fisher re-injuring his lower body injury in Game 1, he finally got back on the ice to skate today, but obviously hasn't played since then. And Shea Weber goes out in Game number 2. No word on any possible timetable for him to get back. That appears to be something that is more significant and certainly more costly for the Predators. And then the other big thing was they needed Pekka Rinne to refine himself.
Right.
Because he's one of the best goaltenders in all of hockey. But for whatever reason, in the last couple weeks of the regular season, he had his struggles, and he's continued them in this series. He's given up 10 goals in 3 games. His save percentage, get this, his save percentage is .898, below 900 for the series against the Blackhawks. You're talking about a guy who's about .940 for his career. So that is a huge drop-off in productivity from the goaltender. And then when you take out Shea Weber as well, at times they looked to me disorganized yesterday defensively, and the Blackhawks certainly took advantage. So something's got to change. The health's got to come back, Rinne's got to step it up, or somebody else is going to really have to elevate their game for this team to be able to come back in this series.
And my fear, Steve, is that it could be too little too late, because it really looks like the Chicago forwards, who we talked about before this series being very formidable and a big challenge for the Sabres' defense, even with a healthy Shea Weber, it looks like they're starting to find their groove, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, Jonathan Toews has 5 points in the series. You know you're going to get that type of an effort out of him. But we've also seen Patrick Kane come back. He had a goal and 2 assists in the first 2 games of this series. Actually, it wasn't all that great in Game 3, but they didn't need him. Marian Hossa has been very good on that top line as well. Brandon Saad finally got a goal for the second line yesterday. But, John, honestly, I think some of the biggest issues for the Preds in this series has been the play of some of the deeper lines for the Blackhawks. Yesterday, you saw Andrew Desjardins get his first goal as a Blackhawk in the first period yesterday to put Chicago on the board first. And at the time, that was Chicago's first lead of this series, believe it or not. So they definitely set the tone throughout yesterday with all 4 of their lines. And that was partly the home ice advantage there at a very rowdy United Center. And they're going to have that again tomorrow night. So the Preds have to figure out a way to come out faster, more decisive, and with more energy tomorrow night than they certainly showed in Game number 3.
We're talking with Steve Layman, my partner at News Channel 5 Sports. He's in Chicago for the Predators Blackhawks series. Steve, you mentioned the Brandon Saad goal yesterday, and I know that was a big theme of your coverage yesterday, which, by the way, was outstanding as usual. That seemed to really be the avalanche goal, if you will, against the Preds. The breakaway, steals it from Colin Wilson, he scores, and it seemed like the Blackhawks never looked back, and the Preds could not recover after that.
I think that's right. I think it at least started the snowball of what became the rest of that second period there, because if you think about it, John, after the Desjardins goal, which again was the Blackhawks' first lead in the series, the Preds come right back with a Mike Ribeiro goal 31 seconds later. Talk about an answer. And then in the second period, the Blackhawks get another goal there, and then all of a sudden, 22 seconds later, Matthias Ekholm ties it up again at 2. So early on in that game, even though the Blackhawks were skating well and playing very well and with a lot of confidence on home ice, the Predators were kind of matching them throughout and coming up with these huge responses. It was sort of deflating the crowd there at the United Center. But then all of a sudden, after really a flurry of Nashville action in the zone, Colin Wilson loses the puck. Brandon Saad gets that breakaway. He beats Pecorine for the goal, so now it's 3-2 Blackhawks. And at that point, it kind of flipped the momentum and started to feel a little bit more like an uphill battle. And the Blackhawks really put the screws down then with the forecheck and the back check. They really upped the defensive pressure. And then that turned into offensive pressure because the Preds couldn't clear the neutral zone. The Blackhawks spent a lot of time on the Predators' end. It led to the fourth goal, and obviously that was a deficit that was too much to overcome.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday, Steve. It seemed like, the Blackhawks just lived in the Predators' zone that entire second period. You mentioned Pecorine earlier and his struggles, and we just ran your interview with him in the first segment. And I don't know, Steve, I just don't like his body language right now. Let's put aside what he's done or hasn't done on the ice. His body language, he's normally a very laid-back, confident guy. He seems like a guy searching for answers right now. Now, I'm no psychoanalyst or anything like that, but just reading his body language and the way he's kind of responding to the questions that are being fired at him, he just doesn't look comfortable. He doesn't seem comfortable. There's speculation out there that he could be hurt. Obviously, we don't know that. What do you see when you look into Pecorine's eyes these days?
I agree with you, John. I think when you look at Pekka, you see a guy who's fiery. And a lot of people don't know that about Pekka because he is a guy that is kind of happy-go-lucky most of the time off the ice and usually greets your questions with a smile and a yeah and goes on and gives you a very eloquent answer. But we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing a guy who is very frustrated, probably more frustrated than any Predators fan or Peter Laviolette about his own play, about letting himself and letting his teammates down in this series. And you're seeing it after the games. When people ask him questions about what's up or what's wrong, it's short. It's not always particularly nice in some of the answers coming out of Pecorine. And we haven't seen that before. And in some ways, I like it. I like the fire. I like the desire to be good so bad that it affects you in some ways there. But the other thing, John, is you're a leader of this team. You're counted on. In some ways, you got to find your normal self. And
right.
For 82 games and really his entire career, Pekka's been one way with the media. He's been long answers and courteous and smiles and those sort of things. And now all of a sudden, in the last week or 10 days, it's been kind of a different guy. And I think it's a direct result of his play on the ice. And I don't think it's going to change until he can figure out how to fix it on the ice. But that might be part of the problem, is I think he's putting a lot of pressure on himself to figure things out, and so far he just hasn't been able to do it.
Another guy you spoke about yesterday was James Neal. Obviously, he's not been heard from pretty much at all in this series. Obviously, he's a guy I know from my days working in Pittsburgh, covering the Penguins. I mean, this guy was brought in to score goals. I understand he doesn't have Sidney Crosby and Geno Malkin feeding him the puck anymore, but, this guy's got to produce. He's here to produce, and so far he hasn't.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't a great regular season, but certainly he put up goals and showed flashes when he was healthy that he could be a big impact player for this Predators team. And down the stretch, James Neal was hurt. And going into the playoffs, you wondered just how good, how effective he could be. I think his injury, and John, I also think the injury to Mike Fisher plays a large role in the fact that he has not been maybe as good as expected in this series because, one, how healthy is he? And two, you take Fisher out of the equation, that's his center.
Right.
And Fisher's a very physical guy in the center of the ice to take on some of those guys for the top lines of the Blackhawks, which I think frees up some space for James Neal to do what he does. He hasn't had that in this series. And if you look at it, his production has gone down in every game. In game one, he got some chances early. When Mike Fisher was there, continued throughout the game. They were fewer in game two, and yesterday, he wasn't a factor at all. And that is a big concern for the Preds. They talked about that today. They have to play better. They have to control the puck, handle the pressure better, and allow some of those guys, the Philip Forsbergs, the James Neals, Colin Wilson, and Craig Smith, who have had special series so far for the Predators, to get more shots, to pound the net against the sensational Scott Darling, who has been the revelation of this series for the Blackhawks, and try to make him uncomfortable to finally dent the net.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about Scott Darling, Steve. We're talking with Steve Layman from News Channel 5 Sports in Chicago for the Predators Blackhawks series. Game 4 tomorrow night. Preds down 2-1 in the series after a 4-2 loss yesterday. The Blackhawks announcing that it will be Darling in net tomorrow night for Game 4. How can you not put this guy in net? This guy has been absolutely incredible. What can you say about this guy? He stepped up, 35 saves yesterday. He has really been the star of this series so far.
Yeah, 77 of 79 shots so far in the 2 games that he's played. And think about this, John. Scott Darling had only played 14 NHL games in his life before Game 1 of this series. He was the backup coming in. Corey Crawford, in large part, is the reason the Blackhawks had as good of a season as they did all year with the injuries and turmoil that they went through. But Crawford didn't have it in Game 1, and that was apparent very early in that first period. So he gets the hook to kind of shake things up, and Darling comes in, stops all 42 shots he faced, the best effort ever in relief in a Stanley Cup playoff game, goes deep into the second period where the Blackhawks eventually win. He really sparks that comeback, and then I think Joe Quimbo said, look, Corey Crawford's the guy who's gotten us here,
right,
been our guy forever, we're going to go back to him. But he wasn't much better in game number 2. In fact, some might say he was just as bad in game number 2. And that caused the Blackhawks to go to Darling, who then stopped 35 of 37 shots yesterday. He was terrific, made a couple spectacular saves in that game. And you're right, now it seems like it's his. At least until the Predators prove that they can beat Scott Darling, he's going to be the Blackhawks goaltender in this series. And considering this was a guy who was an unknown to everyone coming into this series, now he's the star. He's the leader of this Blackhawks team through 3 games, and a big reason they've got a 2-1 series edge.
And to think this guy was in the Predators system. All right, 20 seconds or less, Steve. Finish this sentence. The Predators will win Game 4 tomorrow if?
The Predators win Game 4 tomorrow if Pekka Rinne finds himself. If he can turn in a special effort, stop those Blackhawks frontline guys, and then the Preds offense just gets a couple goals. And that could do it tomorrow night, and they need it because you don't see them winning multiple games in Chicago. They need to get that home ice advantage back.
Great stuff as always, Steve. That's why you're the best. Thanks. Enjoy the night.
You got it, JB. See ya.
All right, Steve Layman joining us from Chicago, getting ready for Game 4 between the Blackhawks and Predators. Predators need a win to tie that series up. Otherwise, it's a long hill to climb. When we come back, we're going to switch gears and talk Titans, and we're going to hear from one of the new Titans, free agent linebacker Brian Arakpo. That's next on SportsLine. Stay with us.